to focus instead of being pulled, having your focus and your attention pulled every time something jingles at you. And we also need to set up our mental environment. And that's by being clear on our focus, on our priorities, so that we know what needs to be done in what time frame and what tools and references and resources we need in order to be able to deliver on those priorities. So that's simple look at focus factor number 2, our environment. Focus factor number 3, our emotions. Now, we've grown up, at least our kids have grown up in a generation of social media. And oh my gosh, how, as we've been talking about in the last on human flourishing and even so far in focus, how many distractions and how much fragmentation exists in our environment. This is doing things to our brains and our brain functioning and our ability to focus and concentrate. It also yanks people around by their emotions. The heart was actually evolutionarily formed in the human dynamic of evolution before the brain. So we tend to get feelings before we have thoughts. And so when we get and have feelings about things, unless we know how to handle them through developing our emotional intelligence and building in a sense of resilience, building in a sense of pacing, building in a sense that you don't have to take everything and everybody too personally, then we are going to be hijacked emotionally. And that throws people off and sends them in a tailspin, just like I described earlier when someone didn't respond immediately to your social media post or request or email or text. Along with the emotions, one of the ways you can express positive emotions in the workplace is to have empathy with yourself, for starters, being able to juggle all the demands that you've taken on in a personal and professional life, but also empathy for others. The reality is everybody operates from our own logic bubble. We do things that make sense to us from our point of view. Now, there are times when you're operating within cultural norms and there are certain expectations about the way you're supposed to act, react, or handle things. But the reality is our invisible thoughts are invisible. And in fact, we interpret other people's behaviors based on our, those behaviors are what's visible, but we interpret them for the most part from our thought bubble, not from their thought bubble. So having empathy for why people do what they do, giving them a little bit of credit and assuming positive intent goes a long way to building up that focus factor number 3 of developing your emotional intelligence. Okay, focus factor number 4 has to do with experience. Now, the reality about the brain, in fact, the excellence about the brain is its ability not only to make connections, but to create patterns. If we didn't have this pattern-making ability of our brain, we'd never get through a day because we couldn't remember anything, how to dress ourselves in the morning, how to drive to work, all kinds of things. So it's true that past experience does shape our future focus. And neuroplasticity, what they found out in recent decades about the brain, is that when you create this neural trace through repetition that I mentioned earlier, you lay down a pathway which becomes the path of least resistance. And your brain remembers that more easily than your brain remembers something that you encounter either for the first time or encounter something differently. Now, generally, that's a good thing, but it can also get us into a rut. And so when our past experience doesn't serve us anymore, we have to have strategies to override an old neural pathway with a new, more productive neural pathway. So the reality is, to have a new experience, you have to have new experiences. And so as focus factor number 4, you need to be willing to step out and try new things. And that's where next time we get together, we're going to talk about creativity. How can you create a creative lifestyle to overcome or design the life you want in a way that gives you the experiences you actually want to flourish. And then focus factor number 5 has to do with expression. That's self-expression, the option and the willingness and the ability to speak about what's on your mind, what's important to you, what matters to you and to others, be they on a personal level or on an organizational level in terms of what matters and what your job is and what you're responsible for. So therefore, we need clarity about those priorities, and very often on multiple levels. So we need to be clear what our tasks are in terms of the role and the job, so that when we are expressing ourselves, we actually are doing it in a way that's channeled and focused in a way that gets the job done. And so you have to do the juggling act. Hopefully there's alignment between your personal, if not personal priorities, at least your personal values, and you've bought into the priorities of the workplace so that you can, with integrity, get the job done, focus and get the job done. Now, there's also desired results that are the bigger picture, which includes the bigger picture maybe of your career development or developing the organization, contributing in ways that allow you to add value beyond what the job description has in mind for you. And also there's your life values in order for you to express in such a way that you can stand up for what you believe in. Now, we don't always have to do that. It seems like the millennial generation feels like they have a right and almost are entitled or have a responsibility to always be speaking up and voicing their opinions. But the reality is it's not always necessary unless you have a reason to. And if you do feel a need to always be voicing your opinion and standing up for what you believe in, you need to pick the appropriate forum for this to happen. So when you, even as you're focusing on expression, you want to focus on the proper venue that's appropriate for the type of expression you are seeking to share. Okay, now here's a key thing. A focal point, and in terms of expression, becomes a pivot point, which makes it easier to make shifts and changes in either what you want to say or what you want to do. So when you can hone in on this focal point, which, as I said, becomes a pivot point, it almost feels like magic. And that's the hocus pocus of the power of focus. That when you focus and you have alignment of your values, of the tasks and the priorities, then it's like magic. And the thing about magic is we know that the magician is doing something. We just have, he or she's either misguided our attention, sorry, not misguided, misdirected our perception so we don't see what he's actually doing, or it's actually just well hidden in the dynamics. So we don't see how the trick is done. But the reality is, you know that it's possible somehow. So with focus, we use focus to get rid of distraction and create underlying habits and practices and even a motivation that will allow us to use focus as an empowerment technique. And just to finish out this little chat about the power of focus, don't limit your focus simply to the skill level, which mostly is what I've been talking about so far in this session today. Focus also touches your life at the level of soul. We want to be living and working with what matters to us, with passion, with engagement, even with love. And when that happens, it's fulfilling. And we tie it to our work, and we can tie it to a life that becomes a life of meaning and purpose, the ultimate in human flourishing. So we'll wrap it up for today and invite you to remember to breathe fully and appropriately, and also set up your working environment and get enough light and get enough water and sleep and so on. And also clarify your priorities so that you can focus and fulfill yourself and flourish. All right, so that's it for today. And I want you to remember that the life you live is the legacy you leave. Bye-bye now.